15 doctors failed to save the billionaire until the maid said, "Stop." Inside the VIP floor of St. Regis Medical Center in Boston, 15 of the world's most renowned doctors surrounded the convulsing body of Leon Hart, a 38-year-old renewable energy billionaire. Monitors screamed red alerts. His pulse spiked violently, then plummeted. Oxygen levels crashed. A cardiologist shouted orders while a toxicologist frantically scrolled through databases. They were losing him, and nobody understood why. In the corner, a woman in a gray maid's uniform stood frozen, clutching a tray of fresh linens. Her eyes locked onto the IV bags pumping fluid into Leon's veins, and something ancient stirred in her memory. Something the machines couldn't see. Her voice cut through the chaos, steadily steady and certain. "Stop. Please. You're killing him." Every head turned. The room went silent. Welcome to Life in Stories. If this tale touched your heart, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our inspiring true life narratives. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love connecting with our global family. The Boston skyline glittered like scattered diamonds against the October night, each tower a monument to ambition and capital. From the 72nd floor of the Millennium Tower, Leon Hart's penthouse stretched across an entire level, 8,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling glass that transformed the city below into living wallpaper. Tonight, that glass palace hosted 300 of the world's most influential people, all gathered to celebrate the Hart Foundation's latest initiative, bringing solar microgrids to 20,000 off-grid villages across sub-Saharan Africa. Crystal champagne flutes caught the light from sustainable LED installations. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the terrace doors. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits clustered around interactive displays showcasing Hart Energy Solutions' newest battery technology, sleek silver panels that promise to store sunlight efficiently enough to power entire communities. Photographers from Forbes, Fortune, and Wired circulated discreetly, capturing moments that would become tomorrow's headlines. Elena James moved through this glittering landscape like a shadow, her gray service uniform rendering her practically invisible. She carried a silver tray of imported champagne, refilling crystal flutes with practiced efficiency, her presence acknowledged only by the occasional empty glass thrust toward her without eye contact. She'd learned long ago that wealthy people looked through domestic staff the same way they looked through windows. Necessary transparency, nothing more. She watched Leon Hart hold court near the center of the room, surrounded by admirers hanging on his every word. At 38, he possessed the lean intensity of someone who treated sleep as negotiable and meals as inefficient. His dark suit fit perfectly across shoulders that spent too many hours hunched over laptops. When he smiled for the cameras, the expression never quite reached his eyes. Those remained sharp, calculating, always measuring return on investment even in casual conversation. Elena had worked in his penthouse for 18 months, long enough to recognize the performance. The effortless charm he displayed tonight required the same engineering precision he applied to battery cells. Every gesture calculated, every word optimized for maximum impact. He was selling vision the way other men sold products, and his audience was buying. But Elena saw what the cameras missed. She noticed the slight tremor in his left hand when he lifted his water glass. Water, not champagne, she noted, though no one else would. She saw him grip the edge of the display podium as if the floor might tilt beneath him. She'd seen the untouched dinner plate his personal chef had prepared earlier, now concealed behind a potted orchid. She'd counted the pill bottles on his bathroom counter that morning. 23 different supplements, peptides, and experimental compounds, each promising to optimize some aspect of human performance. He was brilliant and exhausted and slowly disappearing into his own ambitions, and nobody in this room full of admirers seemed to notice or care. Ladies and gentlemen, Leon's voice cut through the ambient conversation as he stepped onto the small stage erected near the eastern windows. The quartet fell silent. Guests turned, champagne pausing mid-sip. Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate not just innovation, but humanity's potential. Elena positioned herself near the service entrance, tray balanced on her hip. From this angle, she could see his face in profile against the Boston skyline, a man framed by the city he'd helped transform with his technology. 5 years ago, Leon continued, his voice carrying that distinctive blend of passion and precision that had made him a TED Talk phenomenon. I stood in a village in Tanzania where children studied by kerosene lamplight, where clinics couldn't refrigerate vaccines, where potential was being extinguished every single night by something as preventable as darkness. He paused, letting the image settle. Tonight, that village runs on sunlight. Solar panels and battery arrays have given them something more valuable than electricity. They've given them possibility. The audience murmured appreciation. Someone started to clap, but Leon raised a hand, smiling. We've proven the technology works. We've proven it scales. Now we're expanding to 20,000 more communities and... His voice caught. The pause stretched a second too long. Elena's fingers tightened on the tray. And we're going to... Leon's left hand went to his chest. His face drained of color so quickly it looked like someone had pulled a plug. The tremor she'd noticed earlier became a violent shudder that ran through his entire body. We're going to prove that innovation... He swayed. His knees buckled. Elena's tray hit the floor with a crash that shattered the stunned silence. Crystal exploded across marble as she ran toward the stage, her voice tearing through the shocked paralysis that had frozen 300 people. Call 911! Someone help him! Leon collapsed forward, his body convulsing as he hit the polished stage floor. The sound of his head striking wood cracked through the penthouse like a gunshot. Guests screamed and backed away, creating an instant circle of horrified spectators. Someone's phone clattered to the floor. A woman in a red gown pressed her hands to her mouth. Elena reached him first, dropping to her knees beside his shaking body. His eyes had rolled back, showing crescents of white. Foam appeared at the corner of his mouth. His fingers clawed uselessly at the stage floor, nails scraping wood. Leon. She grabbed his shoulder, trying to turn him on his side. Someone get a doctor. Now. I'm a physician. A silver-haired man in a tuxedo pushed through the crowd, dropping beside her. He pressed 2 fingers to Leon's neck, checking for pulse. His heart's racing, 200 beats per minute, maybe more. He looked up, scanning faces. Does anyone know his medical history? Medications? Allergies? Elena's mind raced through 18 months of observations. The pills, the supplements, the experimental compounds, the untouched meals, the imported seafood deliveries, the dinner, she whispered. Tonight's menu. Did he eat anything? But the physician wasn't listening. He was barking orders at someone to clear space, to get ice, to find an AED. The penthouse dissolved into controlled chaos as sirens began wailing in the distance, growing closer. Within 7 minutes, EMTs flooded through the private elevator. Within 12, Leon Hart was strapped to a gurney, an oxygen mask covering his foam-flecked mouth, IV lines already threading into his arms. The lead paramedic rattled off vitals into his radio. Male, 38, tachycardic, presenting with seizures, possible cardiac event, GCS of 7, transport time 3 minutes. Elena stood frozen as they wheeled him toward the elevator, her hands still trembling from touching his convulsing body. One of the EMTs glanced at her. You family? She hesitated. I work for him. I'm his domestic aide. Come if you want. We might need information. She didn't think. She simply followed, stepping into the elevator as the doors closed on 300 shocked faces and a charity gala that had transformed into a catastrophe. The ambulance screamed through Boston's streets, lights painting the night in urgent red and blue. Elena sat pressed against the wall as paramedics worked over Leon's body, calling out numbers she half understood, administering drugs whose names she'd never heard in nursing school. St. Regis Medical Center's VIP entrance opened like a mouth, swallowing the ambulance whole. Then Leon was gone, rushed through double doors into a world of sterile light and urgent voices, while Elena stood alone in the hallway, still wearing her gray uniform, her hands marked with the faint residue of champagne and fear. A nurse appeared, clipboard ready. Relationship to patient? Employee. I clean his home. The nurse's expression flickered with something between pity and dismissal. You can wait in the family lounge. Second floor. But Elena didn't move to the elevator. Instead, she walked slowly down the corridor until she found the observation window looking into the VIP treatment bay. Inside, she counted them as they assembled. 15 doctors, each in different colored scrubs denoting different specialties, all converging on the convulsing body of the man who'd been giving a speech about saving the world just 43 minutes earlier. Monitors screamed. Numbers flashed red. A cardiologist barked orders while a neurologist argued about protocols. They were doing everything right according to their training, their expertise, their expensive educations. And Elena James, standing invisible behind glass in her maid's uniform, watched Leon Hart's fingernails turning faintly blue at the edges and felt recognition bloom in her chest like a dark flower. She pressed her palm against the cold window. It's not the heart, she thought. It's poison. Elena stood motionless behind the observation glass, her breath fogging the window in small circles that appeared and vanished like ghosts. Inside the treatment bay, 15 doctors moved with the choreographed urgency of a surgical strike team, each voice layered over the others in a cacophony of medical terminology that would have been incomprehensible to most observers. But Elena understood enough, and what she understood was wrong. Her mother's voice drifted through memory like smoke from the cooking fires of their mountain village. Watch the nails first, me child. When the lips turn blue, you already late. But the nails, dem tell the story before the body knows it dying. The blue discoloration at the beds, the stiffening in his extremities, the wave pattern convulsions, these are classic signs of saxitoxin exposure. If you keep pumping stimulants into his system, you'll trigger complete respiratory collapse. This woman has no medical credentials, Dr. Foster announced to the room, his voice dripping contempt. She cleans floors. Someone remove her immediately before I have her arrested for interference with treatment. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway, hands moving toward Elena's arms. The monitor flatlined. The sustained tone cut through every other sound in the room. A single electronic scream that meant Leon Hart's heart had stopped beating. Paddles! Dr. Foster barked. Charging to 200 joules! No! Elena lunged forward, her body moving with muscle memory from 1,000 training scenarios she'd practiced in nursing school before poverty had stolen that future. She grabbed the IV line with both hands, pinching it shut above the injection port. The electrical shock will cook the toxin into his tissues. You need oxygen and charcoal, not defibrillation. Get her out! Dr. Foster roared. But a young resident in green scrubs, barely 30, with dark circles under his eyes and the haunted look of someone still idealistic enough to question authority, stepped between Elena and the security guards. Elena recognized him. Dr. David Hillary, who'd come to Leon's penthouse 3 months ago for a dinner party, who'd spoken kindly to the kitchen staff while other guests had ignored them completely. Wait, Dr. Hillary said quietly. What if she's right? She's a domestic worker. Dr. Foster's hand was shaking with rage. She has no medical training, no license, no authority to... She just described saxitoxin poisoning perfectly, Dr. Hillary interrupted. Symptoms I've only read about in toxicology journals. How would a maid know that unless— The flat line continued its monotone scream. Elena looked directly at Dr. Hillary, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. I studied herbal nursing at University of the West Indies. I didn't finish my degree, but I learned to recognize this. My mother was a traditional healer in Jamaica. I've seen this exact poisoning before. She turned to the room. You have maybe 90 seconds before brain damage becomes permanent. Please, let me try. Dr. Foster opened his mouth to refuse, but Dr. Hillary was already moving. Activated charcoal, he called out, sprinting toward the supply cabinets. Powdered, not suspension. Dr. Hillary, I am ordering you to— With respect, sir, he's already dead by our methods. Dr. Hillary returned with a dark bottle and measuring cup, his hands moving with efficient speed. At this point, what exactly do we have to lose? Elena released the fourth line and grabbed the charcoal, her fingers remembering the exact proportions her mother had taught her. 2 parts charcoal to 1 part water, mixed to a consistency that could pass through the nasogastric tube already in place. She worked with absolute focus, blocking out Dr. Foster's furious protests, blocking out the security guards hovering uncertainly, blocking out everything except the dying man before her and the knowledge etched into her bones. Tilt his head, she instructed Dr. Hillary, who obeyed without hesitation. I need someone to ventilate. Pure oxygen, high flow. The respiratory therapist, a woman in her 40s who'd been watching with wide eyes, stepped forward and adjusted the oxygen flow to maximum. Elena administered the charcoal slurry through the tube with steady hands, the same way she'd done it for fishermen who couldn't afford hospital care, for village children who'd eaten contaminated shellfish, for her mother's patients who'd survived because traditional knowledge and modern medicine had learned to speak the same language. 30 seconds passed. The flat line continued. 60 seconds. Dr. Foster was calling for security backup, his voice promising criminal charges, lawsuits, imprisonment. 90 seconds. Elena's hands remained steady on Leon's shoulder, her eyes fixed on his face, her lips moving in silent prayer to gods she'd stopped believing in the day her mother died. Then, a beep. Faint. Irregular, but unmistakably a heartbeat. Another beep. The line on the monitor jumped, showing electrical activity. The blue tint at Leon's nail beds began to recede, pink color creeping back in like dawn breaking. His chest rose in a shallow breath, then another. The convulsions slowed, then stopped. The treatment bay fell into absolute silence. 15 doctors and 4 nurses stood frozen, watching the monitors climb toward stability, heart rate dropping from dangerous to merely elevated, oxygen saturation rising from critical to marginal to acceptable. Elena stepped back slowly, her hands black with charcoal residue, her entire body trembling with adrenaline crash. Dr. Foster's face had gone from red to white. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold as a surgical blade. You touched a patient without authorization. You administered treatment without credentials or consent. He turned to security. Escort her from the building. I'm filing charges for practicing medicine without a license. She'll be fortunate if she's only deported. The security guards grabbed Elena's arms, pulling her toward the door. Behind her, Leon Hart's heartbeat maintained its steady rhythm. The monitor showed him stabilizing, blood pressure rising, breathing deepening. She'd saved his life, and lost everything else. Elena sat on the edge of her narrow bed in Queens, staring at her blackened hands. The charcoal had stained her palms and the crescents beneath her fingernails, marking her like evidence of a crime. Outside her third-floor window, the radiator clanged its familiar rhythm while someone's television blared through the thin walls. The digital clock on her nightstand blinked 3:47 a.m. in angry red numbers. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw security guards dragging her through St. Regis Medical Center's corridors, while doctors and nurses watched with expressions ranging from shock to contempt. She heard Dr. Foster's voice promising criminal charges, deportation, the full weight of institutional authority crushing someone who dared to step beyond her designated place. Her phone sat silent on the scarred wooden dresser. No calls, no messages. The hospital had confiscated her employee badge when they'd escorted her out. By now, the staffing agency that had placed her with Leon Hart would have been notified. Her name would be flagged in their system. Do not hire. Interfered with medical treatment. Liability risk. 18 months of stable work. Gone. The apartment rent was due in 12 days. She had $463 in her checking account and a daughter in Kingston who needed money for school uniforms. Elena stood and walked to her window, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. Across the alley, a neon bodega sign flickered, "Open 24 hours" in green and red. A man in a security uniform stood outside smoking, his breath turning to fog in the October chill. She wondered if Leon Hart was still alive. The news stations probably knew by now. A billionaire's medical emergency would be headline material. She picked up her phone and opened the browser, her stained fingers leaving smudges on the screen. The first result made her chest tighten. Tech billionaire Leon Hart stabilizes after mysterious collapse. Hart Energy Solutions founder saved against all odds after emergency at charity gala. She skimmed the article, words like miraculous recovery and world-class medical team and experimental treatment protocols. Her name appeared nowhere. The narrative had already been written. 15 brilliant doctors had performed heroic interventions to save one of America's most valuable minds. Elena closed the browser and set the phone down carefully, as if it might shatter. Of course, this was how the world worked. The powerful received credit. The invisible remained invisible. She'd been naive to imagine anything different, even for a moment. She was returning to bed when headlights swept across her window. A car had pulled up to the curb below. Not the usual beater sedans that lined this street, but something sleek and black that reflected street light, like polished obsidian. Elena's pulse quickened. Immigration enforcement didn't usually arrive in luxury vehicles, but fear didn't follow logic. She watched a man in a dark suit emerge from the driver's side and look up at her building, checking an address on his phone. 3 sharp knocks on her apartment door made her flinch. She approached slowly, peering through the peephole. The man in the suit stood in the dim hallway, his expression professionally neutral. "Miss James?" His voice carried through the hollow core door. "My name is John Webb. I work for Mr. Leon Hart. He'd like to speak with you if you're willing." Elena's hand froze on the deadbolt. Is he all right?" "He's recovering. And he's asking for you specifically." John pulled a business card from his jacket and slid it under the door. "I have a car waiting. No pressure, no obligation. But he was quite insistent that I find you tonight." She picked up the card. Embossed letters spelling John Webb, Chief of Staff, Hart Enterprises, a phone number, an email address, the weight of institutional legitimacy. "I could lose my apartment if I don't pay rent," Elena heard herself say through the door. "I could be deported." Why would he want to see me? "I think," John said carefully, "he wants to say thank you." 20 minutes later, Elena sat in the back of the town car as it glided through empty streets toward St. Regis Medical Center. John drove in silence, allowing her to process. She'd changed into clean jeans and a sweater, scrubbed her hands until the charcoal residue faded to gray shadows, pulled her hair into a neat ponytail, armor of normalcy over a trembling core. The VIP wing of St. Regis looked different in the pre-dawn darkness, quieter, the urgency replaced by the humming maintenance of stabilized patients. John led her through corridors she'd been dragged through hours earlier, but now the nurses nodded respectfully as they passed. Leon Hart's private recovery suite occupied the entire corner of the 8th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced east, where the sky was just beginning to pale with approaching sunrise. Medical equipment blinked quietly in the corners, but the room felt more like a high-end hotel than a hospital. Leon sat propped against pillows, his face still pale but no longer the deathly gray Elena remembered. An IV line ran into his left arm. Oxygen prongs rested beneath his nose. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of the commanding presence he'd projected at the gala. Human, breakable. When Elena entered, his eyes tracked to her with laser focus. "Leave us," he said quietly to John, who nodded and withdrew, closing the door with a soft click. Silence stretched between them. Elena stood near the door, uncertain, her hands clasped in front of her like a student called to the principal's office. "They told me you saved my life," Leon finally said. His voice was hoarse, damaged from the intubation. "That when 15 specialists were arguing over protocols, you recognized what was killing me and stopped it." Elena's throat felt tight. "I just did what I knew was right." "They also told me you were fired. That criminal charges are being discussed." Leon's jaw tightened. "That Dr. Foster called you reckless and dangerous and wants you prosecuted for practicing medicine without a license." "I shouldn't have interfered," Elena whispered. "I know that. I just—" Her voice cracked. "I couldn't watch you die when I knew. I couldn't." Leon was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Tell me about your mother." So Elena told him. Standing in that expensive room as dawn broke over Boston, she told him about Rose Morrison, the bush doctor who'd read sickness in breath and skin, about the nursing program she'd abandoned when her mother died, about the debts and the desperate visa application, and the years of cleaning other people's homes while her education gathered dust in memory. Leon listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. "You've been cleaning my floors for 18 months, he said when she finished. "You've seen me every day. Why didn't you ever say anything? About your background, your training?" Elena almost laughed. "Mr. Hart, do you know how many people with advanced degrees are cleaning houses in this city? How many doctors drive Ubers? How many engineers work construction?" She met his eyes. "Nobody with power wants to hear that the woman scrubbing their toilet used to teach university classes. It makes them uncomfortable. Easier to not see us at all." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but Leon didn't flinch. Instead, something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or shame. "You noticed I was sick," he said quietly. "Before the gala. I remember you watching me sometimes. I thought you were just doing your job, but you were reading symptoms, weren't you?" Elena nodded. "The tremor in your hand, the untouched meals, the way you gripped furniture when you thought no one was looking, and the supplements." She paused. "Mr. Hart, you were taking 23 different compounds. Some of them contraindicated each other. Your body was already compromised before the toxin, and you never said anything." "Maids don't give medical advice to billionaires," Elena said simply. "We survive by being invisible." Leon was quiet for so long that Elena thought the conversation might be over. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry," Elena blinked. "For what? For not seeing you. For living in a world where brilliant people clean my floors and I never bothered to ask their names, their stories, their worth, beyond the services they provided." He looked down at his hands, still showing faint traces of the blue discoloration that had nearly killed him. 15 doctors, millions of dollars in medical equipment, every advantage money and technology could provide, and the only person who could save me was someone I'd trained myself not to notice. Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "You're not just a maid," Leon said, meeting her eyes again. No, Elena replied quietly. I'm what I had to become to survive. The sun broke over the horizon, flooding the room with gold light. Leon reached for the tablet on his bedside table, his movements still weak but determined. My head of legal is named Patricia Morrison. She's already been working through the night. He pulled up an email and turned the screen toward Elena. Dr. Foster's charges have been dropped. The hospital board reviewed the case and determined your intervention was medically sound and life-saving. They're issuing a formal apology. Elena stared at the words, not quite believing them real. The investigation also found the source, Leon continued. Experimental shellfish from a Norwegian aquaculture facility I've been consulting with. Supposed to be sustainable, revolutionary. Turns out their deep-sea harvesting methods were accumulating saxitoxin in concentrations that standard safety protocols didn't catch. His expression darkened. 3 other people at the gala showed mild symptoms. You probably saved more lives than just mine. I don't want recognition, Elena said quickly. I just want a job that uses your actual skills, Leon interrupted gently. A path back to the career you abandoned? A chance to practice medicine legally again? Elena's breath caught. Leon set the tablet aside. I'm starting something new. A foundation that bridges traditional healing knowledge and modern medical practice. Research funding for ethnobotanical medicine. Legal support for practitioners whose credentials don't translate across borders. Clinical trials that respect indigenous knowledge instead of stealing it. He paused. I want you to help me build it. Not as a maid, as a partner. Mr. Hart, I don't have a degree. I can't. You have something more valuable than credentials, Leon said. You have knowledge that saved my life when expertise failed. You have a perspective this industry desperately needs, and you have the courage to speak truth to power even when it costs you everything. He smiled faintly. I can fund your education to finish that nursing degree. I can sponsor your visa properly, but mostly I want to learn from you. Elena's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. Why? Because when everyone else saw a dying billionaire, Leon said quietly, you saw a human being worth saving, even though I'd never seen you as fully human in return. He looked out at the Boston skyline, glowing in the morning light. 15 doctors with every advantage, and they couldn't help me. 1 woman with everything stacked against her, and she refused to let me die. He turned back to her, and Elena saw something new in his expression. Not gratitude exactly, but recognition. The kind that happens when someone finally opens their eyes after years of deliberate blindness. You reminded me what healing actually means, Leon whispered. And I'd like to spend whatever time I have left learning that lesson properly. Elena stood in the sunrise, looking at the man she'd saved, feeling the weight of possibility settling onto her shoulders like a cloak she'd forgotten she owned. Outside the window, Boston woke to another day. Somewhere in Queens, her empty apartment waited. Somewhere in Kingston, her daughter was getting ready for school. And here in this moment, Elena James allowed herself to imagine a future where survival and purpose might finally speak the same language. Okay, she said softly. Let's begin. 3 months after Leon Hart's collapse, spring arrived in Boston with the tentative warmth of second chances. The Hart Foundation headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a converted industrial building in the Seaport district, all reclaimed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows that let the harbor light flood through like liquid hope. Today, those windows reflected camera flashes from 24 news outlets gathered in the main conference room. Elena stood backstage, her hands smoothing the fabric of a tailored navy dress that still felt foreign against her skin. She'd grown accustomed to uniforms, the gray shapelessness of domestic work, the invisible armor of service. This dress announced presence, demanded attention. Her reflection in the green room mirror showed someone she was still learning to recognize. 5 minutes, Ms. James. a production assistant said softly, headset glowing against her temple. Elena nodded, her throat dry despite the water bottle clutched in her hand. Beyond the curtain, she could hear the murmur of assembled journalists, the click of camera equipment being positioned, the ambient buzz of an event about to shift from preparation to performance. John Webb appeared at her elbow, his expression kind. "Nervous?" "Terrified," Elena admitted. "Good. Means you care." He smiled. "Leon's starting now. You'll join him after his opening remarks." Through a monitor mounted on the wall, Elena watched Leon approach the podium. He moved with more confidence than he had 3 months ago, though she could still see the subtle caution in how he distributed his weight, the way his left hand occasionally trembled before he steadied it. Some scars remained invisible to cameras. "Thank you all for coming," Leon began, his voice carrying the measured authority that had made him a media darling. 3 months ago, I nearly died at a charity event intended to celebrate innovation and humanitarian progress. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even then, as I was losing consciousness, some part of my brain recognized the absurdity. A man who'd built his fortune on technological solutions, saved by knowledge that predated computers by thousands of years. A ripple of curious murmurs moved through the assembled press. 15 doctors treated me that night, Leon continued. 15 of the world's best medical minds, equipped with millions of dollars in diagnostic equipment, armed with the latest pharmaceutical interventions and evidence-based protocols. They were brilliant, dedicated, and operating exactly according to their training. He paused, letting the moment breathe. And they were killing me. The room went silent. I was suffering from paralytic shellfish poisoning, a rare toxin that mimics cardiac failure but requires completely different treatment protocols. The adrenaline they administered to stimulate my heart was actually accelerating the toxin's spread through my system. Every intervention, performed with absolute confidence and expertise, was bringing me closer to death. Leon's hands gripped the podium edge, and Elena saw in that gesture the ghost of the man who'd collapsed on stage, desperate and alone. The person who saved my life wasn't a doctor. She was a domestic worker, a woman I'd employed for 18 months without ever really seeing, without ever bothering to learn that she'd studied ethnobotanical medicine at the University of the West Indies, that she'd grown up learning traditional healing practices from her mother, a respected bush doctor in rural Jamaica, that she carried knowledge our modern medical system had trained itself to dismiss as primitive, unscientific, irrelevant. He looked up, directly at the camera, and Elena felt the weight of his gaze even through the screen. Her name is Elena James, and when 15 experts with every institutional advantage couldn't help me, she stepped forward and said one word: stop. The screen shifted to display the Heart James Health Initiative logo, a design that interweaved a mortar and pestle with a stethoscope, traditional and modern medicine speaking a common language. Today, I'm announcing a foundation dedicated to bridging the gap between traditional healing knowledge and contemporary medical practice. We're establishing research centers in 12 countries to document and study ethnobotanical remedies that have sustained communities for generations. We're creating scholarship programs for practitioners whose credentials don't translate across borders. We're funding clinical trials that respect indigenous knowledge instead of appropriating it. And we're building free clinics in rural areas where both approaches can work together, where someone can receive antibiotics and activated charcoal, where ultrasound technology and herbal expertise exist in the same room. Leon stepped back from the podium. But I can't tell this story alone. Because it's not my story, it's hers. Elena felt John's gentle hand on her shoulder. That's your cue. She walked onto the stage on legs that felt borrowed, each step carrying her from shadow into spotlight. The camera flashes intensified, a constellation of artificial stars that made her blink. Leon extended his hand, and she took it, his grip warm and steady. "This is Elena James," Leon said simply. "My partner in this initiative, and the woman who reminded me that expertise without empathy is just expensive noise." The journalists erupted with questions, voices overlapping in a cacophony of curiosity. But Leon raised his hand for silence. "I know you want the dramatic rescue story. The medical details, the controversy around her intervention." His voice was gentle but firm. "But that's not why we're here. We're here because when everyone else saw a dying man, Elena saw a living one. And that difference, that fundamental shift in perspective, is what we're trying to build into the healthcare system itself." He turned to Elena, his expression carrying questions only she could answer. She stepped forward to the microphone, her voice finding strength she'd forgotten she possessed. "My mother used to say that healing happens in the space between knowing and listening," Elena began. "Western medicine is extraordinary at knowing, at diagnosing, measuring, intervening with precision. Traditional medicine is built on listening, to the body, to the land, to generations of observation about how life and death speak to each other." She paused. Neither is complete alone. Together, they remember what modern healthcare has forgotten, that patients are people and people are ecosystems, and healing means honoring all of it. The press conference continued for another 30 minutes, questions about funding, methodology, research priorities. But Elena moved through it with growing confidence, John and Leon flanking her, their presence a buffer against overwhelm. Afterward, when the journalists had dispersed and the camera crews were packing equipment, Leon and Elena stood alone at the windows overlooking Boston Harbor. The afternoon sun painted the water in shades of copper and gold. "Thank you," Leon said quietly, "for doing this, for trusting me enough to try." Elena shook her head. "You're the one taking the risk. Partnering with someone without credentials, challenging your entire industry's assumptions about expertise and authority." "You saved my life when credentials failed," Leon replied. "That taught me something important about what actually matters." He looked out at the harbor, where boats traced white lines across blue water. "I spent 15 years building an empire on the assumption that technology and innovation could solve anything, that progress meant leaving the past behind, that traditional knowledge was just superstition waiting to be replaced by science. And now I understand that real innovation means integration, not erasure." He smiled faintly. "You reminded me that saving lives isn't just about science. It's about soul, about seeing people as whole instead of reducing them to symptoms or statistics or obstacles to efficiency." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Soul doesn't need a degree." "No," Leon agreed softly. "It just needs courage to speak when everyone expects silence." 2 weeks later, Elena stood at the Kingston airport, her carry-on bag feeling impossibly light for a journey that carried such weight. Leon had chartered a plane, not out of extravagance he'd insisted, but because commercial flights wouldn't accommodate the medical supplies she was bringing home. The red soil path to her mother's village looked exactly as Elena remembered, though she'd changed so completely that walking it felt like time travel. Children recognized her first, running ahead to announce her arrival, their voices bright with excitement. By the time she reached the small plot of land where her mother's house had stood, 50 people had gathered. The clinic was modest. 3 rooms built from concrete blocks and corrugated metal, painted cheerful yellow with green trim. Solar panels donated by Heart Energy Solutions lined the roof. Inside, shelves held both modern medical supplies and carefully labeled jars of dried herbs. Cerasee, guinea hen weed, soursop leaf, bitter melon. The examination table sat beside a space for traditional consultations. An autoclave stood next to mortar and pestles carved from local wood. Above the door, a hand-painted sign read, "Rose Morrison Memorial Health Center." Elena traced her mother's name with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of legacy settle onto shoulders strong enough now to carry it. The opening ceremony was simple. Village elders speaking blessings, children singing welcome songs their grandmothers had taught them, local healers and nurses from Kingston's public hospital standing side by side. Elena demonstrated how activated charcoal could be prepared from coconut shells. A young doctor from the university hospital showed how to use a portable ultrasound. Knowledge flowed in both directions, neither superior, both necessary. Leon attended quietly, standing at the back of the gathering in casual clothes that made him almost invisible among the crowd. Elena caught his eye across the room and saw something she'd never expected to see in a billionaire's expression: humility. After the ceremony, they walked together along the path that led to the ocean, the same path young Elena had walked with her mother collecting herbs from the forest edge. "You gave me this," Elena said softly. "All of it. The foundation, the clinic, the chance to come home, not as someone who failed, but as someone who's building something that matters." Leon shook his head. "You earned this the moment you refused to let me die. I just removed the obstacles that shouldn't have existed in the first place." He picked up a smooth stone from the path, turning it in his fingers. "You saved me, Elena." She smiled, remembering the conversation they'd had in his hospital room 3 months ago. "No, you just remembered what living means." "What's the difference?" "Living means seeing people," Elena said. "Really seeing them. Not as functions or services or obstacles, but as whole, as worthy of attention and respect, regardless of what they can offer you." She gestured back toward the clinic, where local children were already exploring the space with bright curiosity. That's what this is about. Creating systems where everyone gets seen, where traditional healers and surgeons collaborate instead of compete, where a woman like my mother would be honored as an expert instead of dismissed as primitive. Leon was quiet, watching the sun descend toward the Caribbean horizon in shades of amber and rose. "I've been thinking about my company," he said eventually. "The mining operations. The communities we've displaced in pursuit of lithium and rare earth minerals. Building battery systems to save the future while destroying people's present." His voice carried the weight of reckoning. "I can't undo those harms, but I can stop pretending they don't exist. I can stop optimizing them away as acceptable costs of progress." "What will you do?" "Listen," Leon said simply. "To the communities we've impacted, to traditional land stewards who understand ecosystems my engineers barely comprehend, to people like you who've been shouting truths that my privilege made inaudible." He met her eyes. "You taught me that expertise without humanity is just expensive violence. I'm trying to learn a different way." Elena nodded slowly. "It's harder, more complicated, less efficient. But more honest," Leon replied, "more whole." They stood together as darkness gathered, watching stars emerge over water that had witnessed thousands of years of human stories. Some brutal, some beautiful, all connected in the vast web of consequence and grace. "Sometimes," Elena said quietly, "the answers don't come from machines or credentials or the newest technology. Sometimes they come from the oldest knowledge, spoken by the voices everyone's been trained not to hear. And sometimes, those voices just need one word to change everything." "Stop," Leon whispered. "Stop," Elena echoed. Behind them, the Rose Morrison Memorial Health Center glowed with lamplight, a small beacon where two ways of knowing were learning to speak the same language of healing. Where traditional and modern medicine were remembering they'd always been siblings, separated by arrogance, but reunited by necessity. 15 doctors hadn't failed Leon Hart that night 3 months ago. They'd simply forgotten how to listen to wisdom that didn't arrive with institutional credentials. They'd forgotten that healing was as much art as science, as much intuition as intervention, as much about seeing humanity as treating pathology. When Elena James had said stop, she hadn't just saved a billionaire's life. She'd reminded an entire system what it had lost in its relentless pursuit of progress, without wisdom, innovation without integration, expertise without soul. And in that single word, stop, she'd begun building a bridge between worlds that had forgotten they needed each other. The ocean whispered against the shore. Children's laughter drifted from the village. Somewhere in Boston, the Hart James Health Initiative was beginning the slow work of systemic transformation. And here, on red soil under Caribbean stars, Elena James finally allowed herself to believe that coming home didn't mean going backward. It meant carrying everything she'd learned forward into something her mother would have recognized as the truest form of healing. Not curing, not fixing, not optimizing, just witnessing, honoring, seeing people whole, and sometimes, when the machines were screaming and the experts were certain and death was reaching for another life the world had deemed disposable, sometimes that wholeness required only one thing: the courage to say, stop, and then the wisdom to begin again.
Thank you for watching Elena's powerful story. If it moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs inspiration today. Tell us in the comments, what moment touched you most? We read every response. Until next time, remember, sometimes courage starts with one word: stop.